Alright guys, welcome back. I want to cover a topic this week that everyone loves. Accessory work. This is an interesting topic because everyone gets so hung up on the nuances of, the special exercises we should be doing and why. This is unfortunately common practice in everything health and fitness. We get so hyper-focused on the extreme things that only honestly make a 5 to 10% difference. When honestly our attention should be focused on the things that are giving us that 90% improvement. The 90% movements in our case are going to be patterns such as weighted chin-ups, rows, military press, push-ups. And yeah, I'm talking about these movements for calisthenic-based movements, so handstand push-up, one-arm chin-up, planche, and lever. In my opinion, there's a certain barrier to entry to be working these, and if you don't have the prerequisites for these, you're probably going to end up just spinning your wheels, never actually making progress. So now that I'm done shitting on not doing the basics, let's talk about movements that aren't the basics. Or another way to think of them is movements that are going to complement your basic movements. Whether it's to support the development of these main movements by, let's say, creating a hypertrophy response, so we're going to increase the cross-sectional area of the muscle, so we've got a bigger, stronger muscle, or simply to perform as prehab work. There's 3 areas we're going to be covering: elbow flexion, elbow extension, and the rotator cuff. Notice how I listed off movements as opposed to actual exercises. Within each movement, I'm going to give you 3 to 4 different exercises that you can rotate through every 4 to 6 weeks. So we're going through an actual process here. So I'm really just decreasing your chances of being stupid and randomly choosing a different exercise every other week. A concept I've learned from Stefan, I still can't say his last name, the position your shoulder is relative to your elbow is going to matter. This alters the strength curve, making the movement more difficult either at the start, middle, or ending position of the movement. Muscles are going to be strongest at the resting length due to the number of cross bridges. If you place a muscle in a stretch position, it's going to be weaker due to less overlap of contractile fibers. This is why we can standing bicep curl more than we can incline curl or preacher curl. With elbow flexion, we have 3 options. We have elbow in front of the shoulder, we have elbow in line with the shoulder, and then we have elbow behind the shoulder. If we look at placing the elbow behind the shoulder in something like an incline curl, this does a really good job at isolating the long head of the bicep. Alternatively, if you don't have access to dumbbells and an incline bench, PELICAN curls are going to accomplish the exact same thing. See, elbow behind the shoulders. This shoulder to elbow position is going to be beneficial for a few reasons. First and foremost, the stretch position we're in is going to leave our biceps incredibly sore. Second of all, like we already covered, the biceps are going to be in a stretch position, so we have less overlap of contractile fibers, meaning it's going to require less weight to accomplish the same effect. Lastly, and arguably most importantly, these are going to do a phenomenal job at hitting the long head of the bicep. In the planche, the long head of the bicep is working to prevent the shoulders from extending and keeping the body horizontal. Next, if we look at the elbow in line with the shoulders, we're going to choose reverse curls, specifically to work the brachioradialis. This is going to be important when we're going from a pronated grip to a supinated grip. So think activities like judo or jiu-jitsu, where we're grabbing our opponent with a pronated grip and pulling them towards us with a supinated grip. But more importantly, in our case, it's going to be the one-arm chin-up on the rings, where we start in a pronated position at the bottom of the rep and finish with a supinated position at the top of the rep. Lastly, we have the elbow in front of the shoulder. This is technically going to work the short head of the bicep. And from a calisthenics perspective, we know with movements like the chin-up, there's going to be a basic order of operations, where the second half of the movement, think elbows roughly at 90 degrees, is going to be completed mainly by the bicep brachii. And due to the shoulder to elbow position, I'm going to say it's more short head of the bicep as opposed to long head of the bicep. In this case, my number 1 option is going to be preacher curls. Alternatively, if we don't have access to a preacher bench, gymnastic rings work just as well. Notice the shoulder to elbow position is the same, elbow in front of the shoulder. Moving on to elbow extension, or simply the triceps, we have the elbow above the shoulder, we have the elbow in front of the shoulder, and we have the elbow in line with the shoulder. Just like our bicep curls, each elbow to shoulder position is going to isolate a different aspect of the tricep. With the triceps, we have the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head. The long head's going to be the only one that actually crosses the shoulder joint. This means shoulder movement can affect this muscle. If we look at the arm to the side position, the upper arm is going to be parallel to the torso. To get into the start of this position, we're going to need to utilize shoulder extension. Then from this point, we're going to utilize elbow extension from an extended shoulder position. Let's take a look at why we care about this from a calisthenics standpoint. First off, when we look at the front lever, we're utilizing isometric shoulder extension to maintain that position. Our main muscles to accomplish this are going to be the posterior delts, lats, traps, rhomboids, but there's also going to be some triceps involvement. Next, when we look at a movement like the 90-degree push-up, the bottom position is going to have a great deal of shoulder extension paired with tricep extension. Moving on, we're going to have arm in front, such as in a skull crusher, but for those of us that have minimal equipment, ring tricep extensions are going to accomplish the exact same thing. These have been shown to possibly work the lateral head of the tricep more. From our perspective, when programming gymnastics work, that elbow in front position is very similar to that elbow to shoulder position we're going to need with the handstand push-up. Often when I'm coaching new clients on the handstand push-up and they're having the fault of flaring the elbows out to the side, I actually like to coach or cue them to think of the movement more as a skull crusher. Something to keep in mind with the heads of the tricep that don't cross the shoulder joint, so the lateral and the medial head. We're going to get a ton of tricep work in with large compound movements. So think dips, military press, and handstand push-ups. Since we can use way more weight compared to small isolation exercises. Moving on to the rotator cuff now. The rotator cuff is made up of 4 muscles: the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. Let's go ahead and take a look at the function of each one of these muscles so you have a better understanding of how they apply to the exercises that we're going to choose for them. The supraspinatus is mainly going to do horizontal abduction. The infraspinatus and teres minor are primarily going to do external rotation, while our subscapularis is mainly going to do internal rotation. With that in mind, let's take a look at the exercises. For supraspinatus, there's 2 movements I like. Those are going to be PELICAN raises and Lou raises. Moving on to the teres minor and the infraspinatus, my go-to option is going to be Cuban rotations. We already know we're programming these for external rotation, but if we look at it from a calisthenics perspective, the ability to maintain external rotation is going to be extremely important in something like the handstand push-up, where as we hit our sticking point, our elbows are going to want to flare out to the side into internal rotation. Lastly, we have the subscapularis. This muscle sits on the front of the scapula, and like we already covered, does internal rotation. You're going to have 2 options here for this one. With the more advanced option, you can include it in the beginning of your training session for more of your primary work, and that's going to be lever pull-ups. This is going to be where you perform a pronated pull-up concentrically. Then as you lower down, you push yourself away from the bar. Relaxing your lower body will make the movement easier, while increasing how far your legs are in front of you will make the movement more difficult. The main pro to this movement is it can be doubled for front lever work. The con to this movement is it's relatively advanced, so most people won't be able to do it, or if they can, they'll only be able to handle a low number of reps before technique breaks down. So a good alternative to these are going to be subscap pull downs on the lat pull down machine. The technique's going to be the exact same. You pull the bar towards your collarbone, then prior to beginning the eccentric, you push the bar roughly 8 to 10 inches away from you as you raise it back up. That's all I got this week on accessory work. And remember, while this stuff is important, it's really not that important. Any questions you have regarding accessory work, throw them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. If you guys are looking for a more detailed approach to programming, fill out the athlete application below to set up a free consult. If you guys like the video, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos, and I'll do this again next week.